unnecessary intro song to totally waste your time.
Do you believe the things that you read coming from the media? Think about it. Do you? Does anybody believe? Well, some people do believe, but do you believe it? My 3 listeners. Do any of the 3 of you ever believe anything you read or hear on the news anymore? I don't. I really don't. I don't believe second-hand accounts of anything anymore. I don't believe any analysis, pundits. I don't believe people who project into the future, speculators, commentators. Who do I believe anymore? It blows my mind that people still share media articles. Like, I was in a discussion with a complete idiot the other day, and he kept sending me articles from The Atlantic and CNN. And we're not talking about, we're talking about articles from The Atlantic and CNN. And if you've been paying attention for the last couple of years, you know that no longer do these articles. I don't know if they ever did. Here's my problem: is I'm thinking now that the media has become what it's become, which is completely just punditry and propaganda. I'm wondering, were they ever reliable before, or did we just kind of accept it because we didn't have any other choice? You know? But anyway, does anybody believe that CNN or The Atlantic or MSNBC or NBC or ABC or CBS or you name it, does anybody believe that they're actually reporting news anymore? That they're just giving us facts? Well, we know that they aren't. Like, how many times do you have to be told that Donald Trump said this, and then you turn around and look up the speech in which he allegedly said that, and you find that he didn't say that, he said something different, before you realize that you're just dealing with people who have no interest in reality. It's all just lies and spin. But what do you do when there's still a significant portion of the population who accepts these sources? And here's what's driving me nuts, is even the more trustworthy skeptics and perhaps, again, they're pundits too. You know, there's a handful of pundits I see online. They're more regular citizen journalists, with air quotes, who basically are vetting things out. They are looking at the lies and saying, well, here's why that's a lie, and here's why. And, you know, maybe they have, well, a small percentage of the time they actually link to the sources. But most of the time they're just pontificating, kind of like how I'm pontificating here. But most of the time what I have to do, and I find that everybody's got to do this on their own, is if you really want to know, you just have to look up the raw footage yourself. Because if you're at all going to rely on somebody else's analysis or their take or their spin, you're not going to come anywhere close to the truth. And that's with all of them, man. Even the ones that I like. The ones that I like, I watch and I'm listening. Because usually I will watch the source thing before they tell me about it, right? Because I'm a little bit weird and I'm halfway addicted to reading actual policy, watching actual press conferences and speeches and rallies and you name it, right? So I get that. I get the initial thing, and then when you read somebody else's analysis of it, or their recap, or a summary, and you've already seen the original, I just sit there thinking, well, that's not even what he said. Or you've interpreted it wrong, or you're spinning it to mean something that he didn't mean. You know? It's like you just can't trust anybody. Is that good news or bad news? Well, as a skeptic, as a lifelong skeptic, and I've kind of prided myself on being a skeptic. You know, the old James Randi. Do you know who James Randi is? Well, James Randi changed my life. He's the one that kind of opened the door to me turning into a lifelong skeptic. Well, I already was predisposed to it. You know, my dad's kind of an anti-authoritarian, and he's kind of a contrarian. So contrarianism, and I've always been a contrarian. I was kind of born with it in my blood. My mom never liked it. I always wanted to question and argue things, you know. But it's just always because maybe just because I'm always curious. I don't know. When you're a curious person, I think you're skeptical of people who claim to have answers, especially when they conflict with your own life and your own experiments and your own thoughts, you know. You know, when somebody tells you, for example, that bananas are gross, and you eat a banana and it's delicious. Start going, well, okay, don't trust the critics much. Not a guy who trusts. Anyway, James Randi was famous for outing psychics. What's that guy's name? He outed the guy who was bending spoons on Carson, and he set up some tests to prove. And he offered $1 million prize for anybody that could prove paranormal or metaphysical activity, you know, or powers. You know, and nobody's cashed that check yet because, of course, nobody can. Everybody wants to believe they have special powers, but when it comes to time to prove them, nobody can. But where was I going with this? Skepticism. So I've prided myself on being a skeptic for all this time, and so my brain's already tuned that way. I'm already. Did I just say already twice in a row? Already. I'm always, I'm tuned and I'm listening for bullshit. You know? I'm listening for the spin. I'm listening for the manipulation. I'm listening for the con. You know? And I think I find it most of the time. Well, I wouldn't, though. I wouldn't find it. I'm not smart. I don't have special powers. I would be just as easily duped as maybe the next guy if I didn't pair my skepticism with a comparative analysis and cross analysis. And, you know, you've got to look. If one person says this, you definitely have to click on the link. If somebody provides you a link with, and they claim it contains a certain data or a certain point, you know, that's why most people seem to. This is what's crazy to me. Like, again, I'm getting back. I'm not a very clear communicator here, but so what I'm curious about is that there are still people who think that sending a link to CNN article or an Atlantic article or a New York Times article or a Washington Post article or a political article or you name it, article, you know, they think that still has authority. And the assumption is that it's because they accept that authority. They see it as authority. And that's what's kind of mind-boggling to me. And that's why I asked you, do you believe these sources still? I get that you used to believe them. I get that you used to at least consider them to be somewhat reliable. I did too, you know, back in the day when you didn't have choice and you couldn't compare what was said about the tweet with the actual tweet. You couldn't compare what was said about the border with actual footage from the border. You couldn't compare what was said about the speech with the actual speech. You couldn't compare what was said about the policy with the actual policy. But now we're only a couple of clicks away from being able to do just that. And it's not hard. When somebody talks about a policy, you can go to whitehouse.gov and look up the policy and read the policy. Or if you're too lazy to do that and you want to have somebody else read it to you, that you could do that. Because there's somebody on YouTube that will read you the policy. Hell, a robot will read you the policy. It's just not hard to find the information you need now. And you know what's really sad about this is that, I've never really been a believer that journalism is much more than art. Well, I used to, maybe. But again, always been a contrarian skeptic, so I've always held out doubt in most of these things. But it's hard for me to believe that we ever believed it. It was a long time ago that I started calling journalists, pundits, because no matter what, it was a lot of it had to do with when I became a photographer. And I realized that, there's nothing real about photography, nothing at all. Absolutely nothing. A photograph is a dead moment. It's still. It doesn't respond to you. It's not. If a photograph is somebody that's got direct eye contact with the lens, they don't blink, they don't move. There's nothing more fantastic or surreal than a photograph. Not even a painting is more surreal, because a painting doesn't even have the real part in it. That surreal means there's nothing even real about a painting. Squiggly lines on a page, but a photograph seems to reflect an instant in reality. But that even just makes it more surreal, And wherever you point your camera, you're only taking a very selection. You're already editing. You're only telling the part of the story that you want to tell, meaning you're not telling everything else, Unless you have a 360 view with context and you know everything that's leading up to a moment. What caused it? You don't know shit. The mere act of pointing your camera or telling a story is already editorial. It never represents reality. It requires further analysis. And the fact that we ever accepted, I'm not going to say we, I don't know what you've accepted. The fact that I ever accepted, even slightly, these journalists as purveyors of truth is kind of mind-boggling, especially now having sort of the mask ripped off and realize, oh shit, they really are just agenda-driven propagandists and storytellers, salesmen. They're selling you, and that's really what a journalist is. It's a step away from an artist selling. The good thing about an artist is an artist just kind of comes out and says, well, this is art. But a journalist, they're a different breed. They're trying to tell you that they're objective, when, first of all, it's impossible for a person to be objective. You can try. You can engage yourself with the idea of objectivity. You can study the whole thing. I went into objectivism after my Ayn Rand phase, And you can try to be objective, but you're always subjective because you're always you and you always have your own experiences, So you're always going to be telling something from your point of view. And this isn't to diminish the idea that facts and reality exist. It's just that literally perspective means that when you're looking at the palm of your hand, the person in front of you is looking at the back of your hand. You're both seeing your hand, but it looks dramatically different. you know. So, but what do we do about this? I'm not here to just complain, because I think there's a bright side to this, and that is that you are a few clicks away, you know, from at least being able to see a bigger picture. And whatever that bigger picture is, I don't know. Do we want to call it truth? I don't know, because even then it kind of gets subjective. But at least you know, at least you get some more, a wider view. And you can see a bigger story rather than being tricked by these little red herrings. And it seems like almost all the stories and pundits and talking heads are all throwing out red herrings. You know, all of them, with very few exceptions. Even my favorite ones, who I'm not even going to list, just because I don't want to get into that. It'll be a different podcast. But yeah, even my favorite ones, the most reliable ones, I still catch them saying manipulative fucking red herring shit. I just go, why? Why do you have to do that? Why? Why do you want to destroy your own reputation? That's what I don't quite understand. This is what I don't understand about, I guess, the lack of self-awareness that people have. They don't realize that that we don't live in an age where we can lie. The great days of lying are behind us. I'm glad to have experienced them in some way. I like that I lived as a child and I could lie as a child. Back in the day, we could lie, you know, and kind of get away with it. But we can't now. I mean, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all the time. I think it's more like you can fool most of the people most of the time. Because most people, I just don't think, and that's what I'm getting back to, is that the fact that people even share links to these legacy media sites like CNN, these sites that are have obviously become salesmen for their point of view, aka propagandists. The fact that some people are still sending links without any irony, you know. Like, I would send a CNN link to somebody as a joke, and I think it would be a pretty good joke. You know, you're in an argument with somebody, and you send them a CNN link. Like, to me, that's humor. Or a Washington Post link, you know. Or hell, I mean, the best joke is to send a New York Times link. Because here's the other theory that somebody else talked about. I think it was Tim Pool. Tim Pool talked about it. And I kind of go along with it. I think we're living in a time where it's not even that these media outlets are so ideologically on the left as they are just desperate to stay alive. And it seems like recently what they may have discovered, and this is Tim Pool's theory that seems to be pretty good, is that they just post both sides of the story. In other words, they post both versions of spin. They'll say, well, this is what the left wants to hear, and this is what the right wants to hear. Same exact story or item of contention, with two vastly different ways of looking at it. And they'll just post both of them in direct conflict. And they don't even give a shit. Why? They're just selling papers, man. They're trying to stay alive. They're trying to keep staff paid. They're trying to keep the lights on. And I think that might be a lot of what we're seeing here. Because, like I've said in other podcasts, I've kind of lost hope that people even give a shit about logic, reason, or facts. They don't. They don't. Not what I'm seeing. What they care about is what their team cares about. They care about what their tribe cares about. They don't spend much time thinking about anything like the philosophy or the policy. They just look around them and see, well, what do my friends think? What's going to gain me favor within this social group in which I find myself? Which position do I need to take here to gain favor? And then they take that position. And no matter what that position is, they take it. And it's not like they even thought that position through, or that they will, or that they even have any interest. In fact, they're not interested at all in thinking it through because it's boring. And let's be honest, most of these philosophical things are boring to your average person. It takes a weirdo to even be interested in reading Socrates, Nietzsche? Ugh. Freud? Ugh. Who wants to read that shit? I do, but not for too much. Like I like the cliff notes, and I'm interested in it. But even I want the cliff notes, So, yeah, you're not going to convince people that the truth is important, because I just don't think they think it is. They don't value it. They value their position and comfort and safety within their tribe. And however that tribe is governed, I don't know. That's a crazy question. I don't know. Is it a collective thought? Is it groupthink? Another person sent me this a link to a Facebook group that he wanted me to join of intellectualism. I could see at the outset that it was all just lefty, progressive intellectualism and justice, which is just basically a way of saying navel gazing that ends in violent theft of rich people's shit. Violent class warfare disguised as something else, But he literally said, he referenced the number of members that it had, and I found that to be quite revealing. Like that's not something that I would ever consider when picking apart an idea, a theory, an argument, is how many people agree with it. I might, in order to realize what I'm up against, but not like, well, this many people, like the number of people that believe something does not give that argument or idea any extra weight or authority to me, just because everybody thinks it. In fact, it kind of does the opposite. For me, being this contrarian, the more people that believe a certain thing, the more likely I am going to be skeptical of it. And I'm skeptical to begin with. So yeah, it is funny. It's kind of why I've resorted to just sharing GIFs of cats and dogs on the internet now, along with my own personal thing. Like I don't often share links to analysis or speculation or conjecture, because who cares, Give me a link to the source. Link me to a conversation. Link me to a demonstration. Link me to somebody that shows me how to do something, something instructional. How batteries work. That's a good link, Show me some scientific tests, Plug some wires into a potato. That's fun. But don't give me fucking media links that are reporting on how they think the world should work and expect me to take them seriously. Anyway, do you still believe the media? Why am I wrong here? Tell me. Thanks for listening.